Welcome to Philosophy15. I'm Scott Aikin.
And I'm Robert Talisse.
We're the authors of Why We Argue and How We Should, a guide to political disagreement. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a quote from Mill.
So, this is one of our favorite quotes in all of philosophy, I think. It's certainly one of mine. It comes from Mill's 1859 book On Liberty, a book with which I'm sure, an essay with which I'm sure a lot of our audience will be familiar. But here's the crucial sentence in the chapter on the liberty of thought and discussion. Mill writes, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that." That strikes me as a profound truth. One of the few such items to be found in philosophy. So there are lots of truths, not a lot of not a lot of profound ones.
Right.
Maybe a lot of profound thoughts that aren't true. But that quote from Mill strikes me as both profound and true. And I also think that it's an idea that captures something important about the connections that we are often finding ourselves talking about in this podcast. In this video cast, about the connections between politics and epistemology, because that's a claim about knowledge. It's a claim that says that in order to fully know your own side of a issue, you have to know the other side.
So in some ways, the emphasis is on knowledge, that there's a kind of conception of knowledge that's at work that looks like it requires some command of the debate, what countervailing reasons need to be considered. I presume that the part of the background assumption is that those who know their own side means that there has to be another side, right?
Right.
So so let's think about this. So what would somebody who rejects Mill, if we're going to be good Millians, we need to know what the other side of the Mill thought would be. So one way to reject the Mill line, or maybe to qualify it, is to say, well, in some cases, there's just not another side. Right? To recognize them as another side would mean that we would have to concede, well, maybe they've got a point, or they've got some evidence, or things are more complicated than we would like to admit.
Right. So one might think that some obvious counterexamples to Mill's Maxim, which is what we might call it,
right,
lurk within positions that are seriously disreputable. Right. In order to know the case, in order to fully grasp the case for, let's say, liberal constitutional democracy, must one know the arguments for fascism? Must one have a command of Nazi arguments?
And presumably you should also not just know them, that you should be able to have answers to them.
Right.
It's not just that I know their arguments and I don't have an answer to them. Right. And presumably it's not just that you know them, it's that you know them and
success.
Have... Right. Good.
So there's some dialectical success to it, right?
Right.
But I guess the one worry is that, does Mill's Maxim require us to acknowledge the existence of a case to be made on behalf of the Nazi?
Right. You have to. Right. In some ways, you'd have to say something like, "Isn't it excellent for democratic theory that all those Nazi jurists wrote such excellent books?"
Right. But I guess the worry is that one worries that Mill's Maxim already concedes too much. It requires us to think that there could be something that deserves to be dignified
as an other side.
As an argument,
Right.
as a reason, as a case
And-
to be made for fascist, Nazi, racist, genocidal views. And one might think, no, the mistake is in thinking that there is a case on the other side
Right.
of the anti-genocidalist
So yeah,
picture.
right. Yeah, if you want to say like, yeah, I'm against racism, and then you say, well, do you know that racism is wrong? You need to hear the other side, right? Maybe it gives too much. And by the way, notice that this denial that there's an other side that's to be dealt with seems to be a sort of a very powerful thought, namely that one of the ways that one can seem to have a good deal of political oomph is to even just address the other side as though they're almost beneath needing to be addressed or needing to be answered.
That's right. So it does seem that there's a. But let me say one step back. So surely because I'm the one who's called this a profound truth.
Yeah, right.
So surely there's surely the Mills Maxim isn't claiming that in order to fully grasp your side of the case, you have to be able to show that there's a plausible, although defeated, case on the other side, right?
Got it.
Right. You can still say, "Oh yeah, there are things that
There are things
Nazis
to say.
present as arguments, and in a purely descriptive sense, they're arguments, but they're always rooted in crazy, premises about biology and
Right.
crazy premises about." The history of certain ethnic groups that are easily debunked and maybe internally incoherent. So I know the arguments, and calling them arguments, I'm not giving them any positive estimation at all.
Right. So you'd say they're arguments, and you want to say they're bad arguments, right? And we want to be able to keep that distinction, right? Like,
That's right.
By calling something an argument, that doesn't mean that you're assessing it as anything other than an exercise of reasoning, or you might even say something that at the very least has passed for someone as reasoning.
Right. But no, I think that there's a further distinction, because you could even uphold the Mill principle, the Mill maxim, and say, not only am I not using the word argument when I appeal to the other side and talk about the other side's argument, not only am I not using the word argument in some complimentary sense,
Right.
I'm not even claiming that the people on the other side are moved by their own arguments, right? I could still say, yeah, what's driving
They've
people to their
motivated
racist
reasoning.
views are not the racist arguments. Those are things that just come out of their mouths.
Right.
They, in fact, might be moved by blind, silly prejudice.
Right.
I think the Mill view can allow that. I think what the Mill view disallows or cautions us against, might be a better way to put it, is the thought that one can get a firm grasp of one's view sufficient to warrant one's confident, vehement assertion of one's view without having some sense of what someone on the other side who is trying to follow reasons and arguments and evidence might say for his view, even if nobody on that side actually says those things.
Right. So in this regard, then, what's necessary is that is it on you as a million to construct better versions of their arguments and views so that you can possess your own better? Instead of constructing straw men of them, you need to construct iron men or iron opposition to ironclad the opposition in order so that you can be sure that you've got the best view. You might say for the sake of one's cognitive health.
Well, so right there might
like-
be an element that, and I think that there's a dangerous thought here about the iron.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Which we can get into. So yeah, I think at the very least, one has to find out what the best opposition is likely to say in the register of reason giving.
Yes.
You don't have to say that they're motivated by the reasons that they give. You just have to find out what they say when they are trying to give you their reasons,
Right.
and find out what the best case is on the other side.
So right, that's just the homework element.
Right. Whether
It sounded like there was something more to that, though.
whether it requires that
You do some reconstruction.
do some let's say super erogatory charity.
Right. Yeah, that's what Iron. Right.
right.
That's what the Iron Man is
Right.
supposed to be.
Right. It might be that might be required.
Right. So let's think about another version of that. So I think that there's something plausible to that thought, which is, and maybe you might say, but that's just what knowledge is supposed to be, right? You might say knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge might just be something that requires, especially in dialectically conflicted domains, may just require a lot of legwork, and maybe even more legwork than what the opposition's doing. That's entirely possible.
Well,
right?
but it's I think it's got to be a little stronger than that.
Okay.
The Mill claim, because
Yeah.
it's not just a prescription for pursuing knowledge. It looks like the pursuit of knowledge is definitely going to have this dialectical contrastive
Right.
component.
There's got to be another regarding
The people
element
on
to
this side say this, the people on that side say this, the arguments on one side are like this, the argument on the other side. So this is how I go about rationally making up my mind, is trying to weigh. Okay. The Mill view is that you don't understand. Not that you're not doing your job as an inquirer if you're not doing the contrastive thing. There's no understanding of a position.
Right, unless it sees it in an issue context.
Right, and unless there's some contrastive, unless you've got some contrastive competence.
Great.
Unless you're able to contrast the reasons for your view with the reasons
As opposed to-
for the other view.
Okay.
You don't have the knowledge. Not that you're not pursuing it in the right way. You don't even have the knowledge of the thing that you hold unless there's contrast to it.
So the important thing is that it's not just that you don't really possess, that the evidence for your view is complete. It's that you don't even understand the view. You might say there's an evidential or an epistemic, and then there's a semantic component. And your point here is that the Millian view isn't just a purely epistemic point about knowing your own view,
Right.
that you don't have sufficient justification for holding your own view. You don't even know. And so your point here is that because it's a point about contrastive features of that view, it's a semantic point
That seems right.
about the view.
Well, let me say, that seems right about what the right way to understand the Millian point is.
Yes.
But it also seems to me also profoundly true.
Right. That's about what it is to have a view on an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to have to pick up with this, I think. We'll do this. Maybe
Mills
we'll do
Maxim
part
number 2 is
Part
coming
2.
next.
All right. Philosophy15, folks. Thanks. We're going to pick up with this in our next episode.